It's the summer of 1975, and the once proud Detroit Red Wings were reeling, and their franchise player was unhappy. Meanwhile, out in Hollywood, the Los Angeles Kings were coming off their best season ever. But still, they couldn't ignite their fan base. Then, out of nowhere, these two franchises became intertwined in a move that sent shockwaves through the hockey world. Now, at the center of it all, a dynamic but controversial 5'8" scoring sensation would go on to become one of the game's all-time greatest players. Welcome to the Pro Hockey Alumni channel, where we celebrate the legends of hockey's golden era in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Now, if you remember opening a fresh pack of Topps or OPC hockey cards for about 5 cents back at the beginning of hockey season, then you've found a home here in our community. Now, this episode is an installment in our transition series, where we go beyond the highlight reels to understand the pivotal moments that shaped hockey history. And today we're taking a deep dive into the controversial circumstances that led Marcel Dionne to become the NHL's first free agent, and how his decision to head west impacted the fortunes of both the Detroit Red Wings and the Los Angeles Kings. And we'll learn about a Detroit hockey icon whom Marcel says was the biggest factor in his leaving Detroit, and the Hockey Hall of Famer who lashed out at Marcel, calling him a selfish loser.
If the Ecclestone gets it loose, here's a chance for Dionne. He's going in alone. Marcel Dionne, and he scores, and the Red Wings lead now 4-2.
When Marcel Dionne arrived in Detroit in 1971, the city rejoiced. Drafted second overall just behind Guy Lafleur, he was the savior Motor City fans desperately craved. And he delivered instantly, with an NHL rookie record of 77 points. But while Dionne shone like a supernova, the Red Wings remained mired in darkness. The franchise was a mess. Missed playoffs, constant coaching changes, a revolving door of incompetent management. Mr. Hockey himself, Gordie Howe, was gone, treated shabbily by the Wings ownership. The volatile GM and coach Ned Harkness had alienated everyone during the disastrous Darkness with Harkness era. Now, Marcel even publicly lamented that the Wings possessed just 5 NHL caliber players on their entire roster. In short, the weight of this entire mismanaged, penny-pinching franchise rested on the broad shoulders of this young French-Canadian phenom. Now, Dionne poured in the goals, the assists, and the dazzling offensive displays. By 74-75, his career took off, with 47 goals and 121 points. That was third in the entire league, trailing only Bobby Orr and Phil Esposito. But Marcel wasn't happy. Detroit was in the midst of a miserable 23-win season. And with Marcel's contract expiring at the end of the season, the Wings pulled out all the stops to keep him happy, even giving him the retired number 12 of legendary Hall of Famer center Sid Abel. Detroit GM and Hockey Hall of Famer Alex "Fat Stelvecchio named Dionne team captain. Now, despite these efforts, Dionne felt adrift, still finding his way as a young man. The chaos in Detroit offered no anchor. He said, quote, "There are things I did that I wish I had been more mature about. What I needed was some refinement off the ice." Now, in the midst of this turmoil, one teammate offered a lifeline. Red Wings legend Mickey Redmond. Now, two-time 50-goal scorer himself, Redmond became the trusted confidant for Dionne as contract negotiations loomed. Detroit's offer, a 5-year deal at $175,000 per year. Now, that was solid money for 1975. And at first, Marcel was happy with that. But a single conversation with Redmond changed everything. Now, in those days, NHL players rarely shared contract information with each other. But Redmond had revealed a crucial piece of information. He was earning $200,000 per season, more than the player widely considered to be the future of the franchise. Redmond's blunt advice: "Marcel, you're worth more. Look around." Now, Redmond later stated, quote, "As much as I hated to lose him, as a friend, I felt I had to tell him what I was being paid. I was obligated to do that." In his own words, Dionne credits Redmond's input as, quote, "the biggest reason I left Detroit." Now, he contacted his agent, the infamous Alan Eagleson, and told him to seek other offers. The Red Wings reluctantly gave him permission to talk with other NHL teams. Now remember, this wasn't modern free agency. any team signing Dionne would have to compensate Detroit, essentially orchestrate a trade or risk arbitration. The stakes were high, and the offers poured in. Now, Montreal, his hometown team, reportedly offered $200,000 per year. You can imagine a Lafleur-Dionne combo. Habs coach Scotty Bowman had once confided in Dionne that the team had considered trading Ken Dryden for him, but of course, that never materialized, and I'm not so sure Montreal was a serious bidder in this process. On the other hand, the St. Louis Blues were serious, but they feared losing center Gary Unger, the superstar of their franchise, in arbitration. The Toronto Maple Leafs offered $1.25 million over 5 years with a compensation package that Detroit liked. That included George Ferguson, Bob Neely, and a choice of Brian Glennie, Jim McKenney, or a draft pick. Now, a crucial factor, as it always was in the 70s, at least the middle to early part of the 70s, was the advent of the World Hockey Association, the rival to the NHL at the time. But for the first time, NHL stars had real leverage. Eagleson threatened that Dionne would jump to the WHA's Edmonton Oilers, who had offered $250,000 per year for 5 years. Now, I'm not so sure how they were going to pay that, but that was the offer. According to Oilers owner Wild Bill Hunter, no team in hockey would top that offer. Well, he proved to be wrong. Meanwhile, the Wings were backed into a corner. They could lose Dionne to the WHA, they would get nothing. Marcel held all the cards. Then came a bolt from the Pacific Blue from an unlikely source, the Los Angeles Kings, then one of hockey's least significant franchises. But also a franchise that was finally showing signs of life on the ice.
Here's Barry. Two beating around Alexander. Drop pass, Kozak, shot, wide, rebound, goal! Bob Barry knocked it.
The offer, $300,000 per year for 5 years. And that was from the colorful owner of the Kings and the LA Lakers, Jack Kent Cooke. Cooke wanted a star, and he was on a roll. Now, just a week before, he pulled off a blockbuster NBA trade, bringing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to the Lakers. Hollywood was buzzing, and Cooke wanted that same electricity on the ice. Now, while Kings GM Jake Milford was away scouting the Memorial Cup in Canada, Cooke made the call himself. He had his sights set on Dionne, and Cooke usually got what he wanted. He told Milford, "I'm going after Marcel Dionne on June 1, and I always get my man." Now, the only significant pull keeping Dionne in Detroit was Alex Delvecchio. Marcel respected and even revered the Hall of Famer and wanted to remain loyal to him. Now, in his 2004 biography, Triple Crown, Marcel recalled, quote, "To this day, I tell him how sorry I am. He was a great coach and a great person to me. I loved that guy. And when I left, he ripped me apart. He said I was, quote, a loser and a selfish player. But hey, I understood his position, but I never took the ripping too seriously." In a final attempt, Detroit owner Bruce Norris invited Dionne to meet, but that meeting was memorable for all the wrong reasons. Marcel reflected that, quote, "Bruce Norris had a drinking problem. It was very well known. So I'm 21 years old. I see this man come into the room half in the bag, and I say to myself, wow, this is an NHL owner?" So on June 23rd, 1975, the blockbuster was finalized. Marcel Dionne and retread defenseman Bart Crashley were Los Angeles Kings in exchange for Terry Harper, Dan Maloney, and a future second-round pick. The hockey world was stunned. But this wasn't just about Dionne's arrival. It was also about who the Kings gave up. Now, Terry Harper was a rugged, stay-at-home defenseman. He was the team captain and undisputed leader in the locker room. He was a veteran of 5 Stanley Cups with Montreal, and he had anchored a penalty kill that was the best in the league in 74-75. His steady presence on the blue line was a key reason the Kings allowed a mere 185 goals that season. That was second best in the entire NHL. Dan Maloney was just 24 at the time, was another crucial piece of the Kings' identity. He was a prototypical power forward before that term even existed. Maloney was a physical force who could fight, check, and score. He netted 27 goals the season prior. Giving up both Harper and Maloney for the pure offensive brilliance of Dionne was a gamble that deeply divided the Kings organization. The Kings had just finished the best season of franchise history in 74-75, a remarkable 105-point campaign built on the pillars of structure, discipline, and a stifling defense, the very qualities embodied by Harper and Maloney. Now, Pulford had just won the Jack Adams Award as the league's top coach, and goalie Rogie Vachon was a finalist for the MVP trophy.
Did not have that much talent, but we played a very defensive system, and it used to frustrate every other team, especially the fast-paced team like Montreal Canadiens in those days. They used to call them the Flying Frenchmen. Right. And we used to put 4 guys at the center ice, and they had to shoot the puck in. It was a very boring style, but we were very successful.
After years of struggling, the Kings' formula was finally working, and now it was in danger of being dismantled for one supremely talented individual. Now, Pulford hated this deal. He felt completely bypassed by Cook, who made the decision without consulting him. In fact, Pulford had been actively pursuing a player who represented the antithesis of Dionne's style, his former Toronto Maple Leafs teammate Davey Keon, one of the greatest defensive centers in the history of the game. But Cook felt although the Kings had improved, the fans weren't interested in boring 2-1 and 1-0 defensive battles. Now, when Dionne arrived in L.A., Pulford's instructions to him were direct and to the point. Quote, "You can't float around center ice like you did in Detroit. You have to come back and help defensively." Well, the trade wasn't without its immediate drama. Terry Harper, feeling betrayed by the Kings, who had promised not to trade him after a recent contract signing, initially refused to report to Detroit. He even filed a lawsuit against the Kings and an antitrust action against the NHL before ultimately relenting and joining the Kings. Now, the immediate impact on the ice, that was negligible for both teams. In fact, both franchises remained mired in mediocrity for the next decade plus. Long term, the Kings were undeniable winners, and we'll examine that era in our next episode in our Marcel Dionne series.
In the slot, Dionne to the right wing, Dionne shoots, he scores! Here's McClellan in front, over to Dionne, he scores! Puck is loose, Taylor in front, Dionne scores! He wins it with a hat trick!
Although not a free agent in the modern sense, Marcel's jump to the LA Kings in 1975 was a watershed moment. He walked away from a passionate hockey town. He turned down his idol. He ignored the criticism, and he bet on himself. In the end, Marcel Dionne wasn't just a great player. He was a pioneer, a catalyst for change in the world of professional hockey. Now, what are your memories of Marcel Dionne? And how would the fortunes of both teams changed had Marcel remained in Detroit? Let's discuss that in the comments below. I had a chance to talk with Marcel recently, and I consider him to be a true treasure of a game, both on and off the ice. Now, if you enjoyed this look back at Marcel Dionne's groundbreaking move to Hollywood, check out our deep dive into the career of another legend of hockey's golden era.
The Wings a little careless in their own zone. Here's Dionne breaking out at center ice, still going. Over the line, trying to work through. He does, he shoots, he scores! And the Red Wings are out in front, 1-0 on a pretty play by Marcel Dionne.